Shall we start the great moment? Bonsoir, bienvenue, félicitations. Toutes les étudiantes et les étudiants connaissent le français, vu qu'ils sont depuis au moins une année à Genève. I will nevertheless speak English because we have some guests, important guests, the families and the friends, and they are perhaps only one day in Geneva, and therefore they will not, like the humanitarians, try to adapt themselves to their environment by learning the language of the place where they work. So, welcome. I'm not Robert Rode. I'm not the director of the Academy. I'm Marco Sassoli. I have just the pleasure to give one course at the LL.M, and I'm the director of the International Law Department at the University of Geneva. The University of Geneva is the mother of the academy, and the Graduate Institute is the father of the academy. So this is a great moment for all of us, for different categories among you. And you know, lawyers have a tendency to make categories. I would say there are two categories of combatants and one category of civilians in this room. And for all of them, it's a great moment. The combatants are the students who were fighting for a whole year to learn so much, and now it's the day of victory. And what is so nice with this kind of combatant is that the third category of combatants, the teacher and all the staff, was not fighting against the first category, but together with the first category for the same aim. And so it's also a day of victory for us. And the third category are incidental civilian victims, the friends and families of our students who had to suffer without them having ever chosen to do this, because the students, at least, they chose. They wanted to specialize in international humanitarian law, human rights, international criminal law, refugee law, and public international law, always related to armed conflicts, while the others were simply incidental victims. So, first, nevertheless, the most important category are the combatants who won their diplomas, and not just by perfidy, but by fighting it right. And now, my warmest congratulations, and you have to be conscious that, in my view, never in your life you will again know so much on all the branches you studied. Believe me, that if I had to pass today a refugee law exam, probably I would fail. You know, all this. And in addition, I must say, I'm very impressed by you because you chose a branch like international law relating to armed conflicts, which people as brilliant as you are, and I was told by my colleagues teaching at the executive master, where I don't teach, that in the executive master too, there are plenty of brilliant people. If you had chosen another branch, you could earn much more money. And this shows that you are really committed to the humanitarian cause. Well, you know, a professor, but even an assistant, I must tell you, is paid exactly the same amount whether they teach arbitration or international humanitarian law. So you really prove your commitment. And I'm obviously particularly impressed by the executive master student because they did not only, as the LL.M students, have to fight with substance and with professors, including one, that's me, to whom in the midterm evaluation it was said that I terrorize students by my way of interrogating them. That's from my Italian grandmother, who would ask me every time I came back from primary school, sei stato interrogato? But those who are who have passed the executive master, they did not only have to combine their private life and this big challenge, but also they had a job, a normal job. And beside this job, you had to study all these branches and deal with your family, friends, your private life, and so on. And believe me, my colleagues teaching at the executive master always tell me how rewarding it is, because you bring experience from practice, and somehow a reality check into the courses. This may be the reason why I don't teach at the executive master, because I like to be the only who has practical experience. So, the second category are the incidental victims, and believe me, those of you who are parents, children, spouses, friends of students, you must have had sometimes a tough time. Because I can imagine that not only before exams, but also when they had to prepare papers and so on, this influenced quite heavily the rest of their life, and you tolerated this just as incidental victims of warfare. And as them, you didn't choose it. Nevertheless, and I must add that even your professors, at least, I never took any feasible precautions in your favor, but all on the contrary, I must say it was only recently that I realized that perhaps I don't only terrorize consenting students, but also people who never consented to be terrorized by me. So I apologize also in the name of the other teachers, but I would like to thank you really very much, because certainly students wouldn't have succeeded without your constant understanding as a minimum, if not much more. And finally, the teachers and the staff of the academy, obviously it is a unique privilege, I would say, and I see here several colleagues who are very shy and therefore sitting in the last rows. No, not all of them here. Professor Riedel, Professor Di Stefano, Professor Kolb, Professor Abdel will speak to us, so I anyway thank her later. I don't know whether they agree if I say that it's the most rewarding aspect of an anyway rewarding function, except the bureaucracy, but that's another story, of teaching, because one has very motivated people who are nearly all very brilliant. And in addition, it's the only profession where you are happy when good people leave. Because normally, when someone leaves, either the person is not good and you are happy, but we don't make a ceremony about that, or it's an excellent person and you make a big goodbye party, but somehow you are sad and you say, I was not really good, because if I were good, I could have retained such a person, while for students, it's what we wish, that they leave with many more knowledge, not so much thanks to us, but thanks to their own efforts at the end. I would nevertheless like to thank all those who were involved in your training during these 1 or 2 years. Obviously, the director of the academy, Robert Roth, who regrets so much that he was ill, but the good news is that he is convalescent and therefore he will soon be back. But he sent me certainly 5 emails per day, so everything is under control. The professors, the teaching assistants, I see many here. Natalie Staffler, who did she must work. She's there. She is hiding, but not disguising, so it's in conformity with humanitarian law. Danny Diogo, Tatiana Avante, Antonella Guillot, and obviously the big organizer and boss, Camelia Kemileva. where people are fighting and where there are incidental victims, obviously there is a neutral intermediary, the ICSC, and I would like to also to thank at least one person from the ICSC is here in two functions, to thank the ICSC, which is always a shining symbol for our students, which many of them see as a personification of law applicable to armed conflict, and obviously Henri Dunant when we speak about the ICSC, but we come later to Henri Dunant and our guests linked so much to Henri Dunant. And here the analogy with armed conflicts ends, because those who gave money, I wouldn't like to compare them to people who finance armed conflict. All on the contrary, I would say it would be an idea if people were given more money for training and law applicable in armed conflict than to armed conflicts, because that would be a win-win situation. Imagine. There would be less armed conflicts, and finally you wouldn't have to give money for training people dealing with the law of armed conflict, because there wouldn't be any armed conflicts. Obviously, the historians would still be needed to explain us how in old times people were seriously conducting armed conflicts against each other. So, nevertheless, many thanks to the donors, to the Wilsdorf Foundation, to the IBA, to the Jeno and Irene Sterlin, to the Solidarité Internationale, to all the alumni, and at least those who graduate tonight should become alumni, who offered one grant for a student, to the Société Henri Dunant, who offers the prize tonight. And finally, you won't believe it, after all the money you paid for this training, unfortunately, the Geneva taxpayer, because I have to tell you that, for instance, my salary, but perhaps you could do without that, and without me, it's paid by the Geneva taxpayer. And all these people believe that it is meaningful that you learn more about international humanitarian law, international human rights law, international criminal law, refugee law, and public international law applicable to armed conflicts, integrating all these branches. Hopefully the professors are still separate, but you combine all these. And in my view, you become now the court, sorry for those who teach international criminal law, the non-existing court in most cases. As all the graduates know, there's no court on which enforces and applies the law applicable to armed conflict, but it is all of you, the graduates, who are now the judges. And please don't forget that you are not only advocates, but also judges, and make brilliant arguments. And I tried in my training to put the emphasis on that. But don't forget that all this is about human beings, and as there is no other judge, these human beings need you to ensure that justice is brought, and not only brilliant arguments. Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to two teaching assistants, Antonio Coco and Patrick Labouda, who will teach you.
First of all, it's really tough to go after Professor Sassoli, I have to say, and to keep up the same level of entertainment, but, well, we'll try to be more informative than entertaining, and occasionally we might be entertaining, but not willingly so. Okay, so, dear graduates, ladies and gentlemen, the public, fellow speakers, So good evening, everyone. Professor Sassoli already introduced us. We both worked as teaching assistants in the two programs last year, and we are still working for the Academy this year with both programs. So why are we here? That's a good question. We're still trying to figure it out. Professor Roth came to us a couple of weeks ago, and he told us, hey, you should say something during the graduation ceremony, but do not talk about the courses and what happened inside the classrooms. Really, that's not something that you should touch upon. And so I was a little puzzled. I said, so, I mean, the programs are mostly teaching. What should we talk about then? And he said, no, talk about the other things. And what are these other things? Sometimes we forget about them. We forget about them because, indeed, the teaching that is delivered at the Academy, it's so intense, it's so demanding, it takes so much of the student's life that sometimes it overshadows everything else that goes on at the Academy, and it's offered by the Academy to the people who attend the two programs. Now, forgive me if I will focus more on what went on in the LL.M last year, but Patrick will deal with what went on with the Executive Master more later. So basically, you all know that the Academy is not just an education institution. The Academy carries out several research projects which have a deep impact on our field of study, on the international law which is applicable in armed conflict and emergency situations. But that's not what I want to talk about, the research projects in general undertaken and carried out by the Academy. I want to talk about the work, the research that you did, that the students, the graduates today did last year. As you know, the Academy offers a program called the Professional Activities Program to its LL.M students. And that's a program which is meant to help students familiarize with the job market, with what it means to look for a job, to work for an international organization, for a non-governmental organization, or to contribute to a serious research project in an academic environment. And I have to say, well, Professor Sassoli mentioned so many things already, so many subjects, and I said how demanding the courses are. And I'm always surprised and delighted to think that despite all the academic commitments that you already have, you choose willingly to undertake even working commitments and to do internships and work on research projects and train every week for the PICTE competition. It takes so much of your time, and it's always surprise for me to understand how do you find this time. And of course, when I was a student also, I managed to find it, usually at the expenses of sleep, but that's, I mean, now you can see it. But so what are these things that I'm talking about? First of all, 26 students out of 35 in the class last year decided to undertake an internship. You have to know that at the Academy we have a partnership with many organizations working in Geneva who accept to take our interns and to introduce them to work, and, well, in exchange, the students get 6 credits if they want to. We work with many institutions. The International Committee of the Red Cross, who's present today, is one of them, the UN International Law Commission, the International Commission of Jurists. I cannot mention all of them because there are too many. But one thing that I want to say, well, when you are graduates, go work for these institutions, you really represent the Academy. And all the reports that we have received this year have been enthusiastic. All these organizations are extremely happy with your work. And so, well, usually it's the students thanking the institution for what it did for them. But this time, it's the institution who has to thank you for the image of the Academy that you gave last year. And not only that, I mean, here we're talking about the image of the Academy, but some of you were directly involved in some of the research carried out at the Academy. The project on economic, social, and cultural rights, the research project on the War Report, which is a publication which every year analyzes all armed conflicts going on in the planet, classifies them, and deals with all the international legal issues arising from them. Well, you gave an active contribution to the research of the academy. So it's not only you taking from the academy, it was you giving to the academy and talking in the name of the institution. I'm really grateful for that. Last but not least, last year, as every year, we sent a team to the Jean Pictet competition, which is a competition where students from many universities in the world apply the concepts that they learned during the year to real-life situations. It's a simulation. Well, 3 brave students, coached by my friend and colleague Ilya Nusov last year went overseas to Charlottesville, Virginia, and they achieved the best result ever of the academy, getting to the finals of the Jean Pictet competition. Well, all that I can say before giving the word to Patrick is thank you. Thank you to all of you. It has been a pleasure as a person, as a teaching assistant, and as a person of the staff of the academy to meet you and to work with you, and good luck with everything that's coming in your life after this.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm also a teaching assistant at the Geneva Academy. And for me, it's not just a pleasure, it's a real honor because unlike most of my colleagues, actually everyone, I'm not a graduate of the Geneva Academy. So I never went through the master, I didn't graduate, I don't have an LL.M from the Academy, and in that sense, it's a real honor to be here to share this podium with Professor Sassoli, Antonio, because realistically, this is the closest I'm ever going to come to being up here. I'm not going to get a diploma from the Academy. So in that sense, thank you to Professor Roth, who unfortunately couldn't be here. It's a real pleasure to deliver this speech on behalf of the teaching assistants. I, like Antonio, I have to admit that when Professor Roth approached us, I was a little confused. It wasn't very clear to me what we were supposed to do, and so we had to improvise. Yesterday we talked to Natalie, and we were asking her, Natalie, help us out here. We're not really sure where we're going with this. So I decided I would talk a little bit about something else that's going on here at the Academy, not here, but over at the Villa. It's an initiative that Antonio and I launched last year. So in September 2014, it's been going on for a year. It's a student-led initiative, and it's called Geneva Academy Wednesdays, GAL, we call it, GAL. And I'm just going to read a short description from the website so you have an idea what this is about. So GAL adopts an interactive format where 1 or 2 presenters introduce the main legal issues arising from an event or series of events before opening the floor to questions, comments, and critique from the participants. The idea is to stimulate an inclusive and respectful discussion among Geneva-based academics working in the field of international law and to further intellectual exchange in a friendly atmosphere. And I have to say, I mean, it doesn't sound that innovative. I mean, you have plenty of events going on here at the Graduate Institute all the time. But I have to say it's been a big success, and it's been a wonderful opportunity. It is something quite different from what you have at the University of Geneva, also here at the Graduate Institute, because we come together and there's no hierarchy. Really, the idea is that we exchange about things that are in the media. So, for example, today you may have heard about, the U.S. sending special operations troops into Syria. President Obama for 4 years has been saying we will not put boots on the ground in Syria, and today, of course, we found out that that's not really true. But it has a big impact for our work. I mean, it definitely has repercussions for our work, and the idea is that we come together and we immediately discuss these issues. And it's really worked out that way. It's been very creative. There have been publications that have come out of these meetings. For example, Antonio published a chapter in the War Report that is basically an intellectual byproduct of one of these meetings that we had. So it's been very stimulating and creative. And I also want to add that GAL is a great acronym. Now, I have heard criticism from people that Gaul is not great, but believe me, we spent, and this is really true, we spent weeks up in the attic. This is where the teaching assistants work at the Geneva Academy at the Villa Moignet. We spent weeks thinking of an appropriate acronym, and Gaul was the best that we could come up with. Yeah. So,
ready?
Ready? Gaul. That's basically the idea.
That's the slogan of the initiative, yeah.
And we love it. We love it. So please bear with us. We're going to continue. We're going to try and push this forward, and hopefully somebody can continue this after we're gone. Before I turn it over to the LL.M representative, Safi, I also wanted to just briefly talk about the Executive Master. So I was the program coordinator for the Executive Master when this group of students started, so in September 2013. And I have to say it's a real pleasure to see you here. Not everybody's here because, as you heard, unfortunately the Executive Master students are also working professionals, and they are now dispersed around the world. But we have a good group here, 6 or 7, I believe. And it's really a pleasure, and I mean, it gives me great pride to see them here, because it's really what Professor Sassoli said. These people work full-time, and then they come on Friday afternoons from 3 to 8, and they sit there for 5 hours, and they still have the energy to contribute to, an interesting intellectual discussion with the professors. It's really remarkable. So I'm really pleased to see you here, and I'm glad that you're graduating on time. So this is the 2013-2015 group. So with that, thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to Safi.
Oh, my picture. I thought there would be pictures of you guys, but okay. Good evening, and welcome again to this evening, and to the building, actually, where we spent a vast majority, I would say, of the past year. I know the Geneva Academy is based in the Villa, but the library on the other side of the whatever that is, the lobby down there, we bonded a lot last year. But I believe I spotted quite a few professors already, definitely some TAs over here, perhaps some former ADH students, definitely current ones. But thank you for choosing to spend your Friday evening with us. And of course, to all the families and friends that have come from all over the place, we are very happy to have you here and celebrate this with us. And of course, this bunch in the front. I'm very excited to see so many of you here. And I know we're not complete, but it was confirmed to me just now on that screen that this is being filmed. And so those of you in Cairo or Canberra, New York, Manila, San Jose, Ouagadougou, we didn't forget you. You're just as much a part of this as we are. And so, this evening is yours as well. A statement on behalf of the class of 2015. I hear, voila! I hear this is apparently what the speaker says every year that they get up here, but public speaking is not my greatest quality. And many of you will know that I spent most of this year not really using my words, but potentially making rather confused and very animated facial expressions instead. So I suppose I find comfort in the fact that there will be no questions from the audience. But on a serious note, as reluctant as I was to get up here this evening, Mayank, I'm aware that sometimes you have to do things that are outside of your comfort zone. And for those of you who attended one of the many events that the Graduate Institute hosts last week, lessons on the Syrian refugee crisis, one of the panelists, the former Prime Minister of Norway, whose name I will refrain from mentioning because I'm not sure I would pronounce it correctly, but she said something that sort of stuck with me, and I find it applies to me now, but I also think it will apply to us in quite a few situations later on in life. And that is that in potentially difficult situations or uncomfortable situations, some have it in them, and others are just, I wouldn't say shy, but not courageous. And granted, she was speaking of European politicians and their what some might consider somewhat unsatisfactory response to the arrival of hundreds of thousands of refugees. But I realized one thing, and that is that if there was one thing that I did not want to be, it was not courageous. So, voila, here I am. But with that disclaimer out of the way, what I actually should be here to say, it was hard to think of where to begin. I know that Antonia and Patrick said there was no guidance, but I didn't have anything I wasn't supposed to talk about, but I also didn't have anything that I could talk about, so I guess it's sort of a clean slate. But I considered an analysis of one of the very many situations of violence or indeed conflict with which we are confronted every day in the news, but also in our work and definitely in our studies. The situation in Syria and its neighboring states, in Yemen, in South Sudan, Myanmar, Burundi, northern Nigeria. There's just a few that come to mind. But instead, I decided to opt for a slightly lighter note. And that is not because the subjects that we deal with are anything but light. And in fact, they are usually quite the contrary. But it's because many of you will know actually these conflicts, regions, issues much better than myself. And also because I didn't have images that would correspond as well. So, whilst I can only hope to scratch the surface in recalling some of the highlights of this year, I'll give it a go. And the following come to mind. The special seminar with Professor Noam Lubo that we had earlier this year, our class trip to The Hague, to which I thank again the Student Council for organizing and their tireless efforts on that. Indeed, our professionalizing activities, which were very varied and very challenging, and we're happy to have had all those experiences. The moment you realize that some of us got weirdly into our role when preparing for IHL pleadings, even when the arguments were sometimes questionable. The fact that no party ever seemed devoid of at least some nerdy discussions or some analysis of how the law would apply to our everyday lives and our relationships. The fact that customary international law is a dance floor. Yep. And thanks to some creative memes, we even know exactly what that looks like. The immense variety, again, of panel discussions, film screenings, networking opportunities that we have had the opportunity to attend, many of which had free food and drinks, at least the ones we chose to attend, because in Geneva, that is always welcome. The occasional, somewhat distressed late-night Facebook threads the evening before an exam, and the immediate response of at least a handful of people with usually more or less the same answer, so that was promising. Our pride in, indeed, Ilya, Julia, and Miki in their very hard work and performance during the Jean Pictet competition. Yeah. And even the dreaded 8 a.m. tutorials, and their unfortunate pairing with what might possibly be Geneva's worst coffee. But yet, we loved both of them somehow. The functional occupation of the lawn right in front of the villa for yet another barbecue in whatever weather. And not to mention that before embarking on this program, I don't think any of us realized just quite how entertaining discussions on the jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights could be. So credits to Professor Milanovic for that one. Or indeed how an LL.M. in International Human Rights Law and International Humanitarian Law could result in ceaseless references to polar bears, fluffy unicorns, and that one day when you least expect it, a professor might turn to you and refer to you as Sugar Puff. But yeah, it happens. Recalling all of these right now, seriously, how incredible has this experience been? And how privileged are we to have become part of this community and to have had the fortune of learning from and interacting with such talented and truly humble individuals. How somewhat bittersweet it is that actually after this evening that all comes to an end. But to be a little bit cheesy, how also very exciting to know what comes next and to see what will be in store for us. So based on the foregoing, it sounds a little bit like this year was a breeze and we only had good times and laughter, which, let me be clear, that wasn't quite always the case. And it was not without its challenges, but we have worked so very hard and we have absorbed and hopefully retained so very much information over this past year. But we have always also collected some very great memories, and for that, I at least am very grateful. So to round this all up, I want to take the opportunity to say some thank yous. And from the bottom of my heart and from the many corners of my brain, thank you to Professor Roth, who indeed couldn't be here this evening, to Natalie and to Danny and to very many of you that for us are behind the scenes at the Academy for making all of this possible and having all of this run so smoothly, to each and every one of the professors that we have had the pleasure of interacting with this year, for sharing their wisdom and their insights, their experiences, their humor, and their unforgettable anecdotes. And I would name you all individually, but you know who you are, whether you are here or not, whether you might watch this on YouTube, I'm not sure. And to the TAs, without whom we certainly wouldn't have been here this evening. You are inspired academics. And on top of that, you appear to have the most phenomenal time management skills because somehow you managed to do your own PhD and research, and you prepare all our tutorials completely. You answer all our questions, our panicky emails, and you have your social lives, and yet you also manage to stay up to date with Game of Thrones, if the tutorials are anything to go by. So how you do this, we would like to know. But finally, the class of 2015, I don't really have words to describe my gratitude towards you lovely lot. But yeah, I actually kind of just want to do an awkward little victory dance on this podium. But honestly, I'm so very grateful that I was able to go through this experience with all of you. And I'm beyond impressed not only by your incredible minds and the lawyers that you are, but also on a personal level, just the wonderful and exceptional human beings that you are. So it's been a tough year, but it's also been so very, very fulfilling. And so maybe Freud was right when he said that one day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. So who knows, we might look back on this very fondly, very soon. I wish you nothing but the best, and after all of your hard work, congratulations, and I can't wait to celebrate with you soon.
So now I call for a representative of the executive master. Don't hide yourself. That's you, Audrey. And Mr. Papenstein.
So good evening to everybody. We're going to share, and I'm very pleased to share the speech with Steele, who also participated in the executive master. And we're very happy first to have been able to follow the master. So thankful to the sorry, it's going to come the flow of words.
I'm working on mine, no worries.
Yeah, we've been repeating. No, we're very pleased to have been able to follow the master, the executive master, and at the same time to be here tonight to tell you how much we were pleased to go through this experience. And also to have the opportunity to be here and to see everybody, because we've been through quite a long time doing the thesis, so away from the academy. And it's really a pleasure tonight to see again the faces of our colleagues who were based in Geneva or even very far away and who came tonight, of the professors, of the assistants, of everybody. So really a great pleasure to be here.
Well, yeah, good evening, everyone. So 2 years ago, this was at the Unibastion. We attended the graduation ceremony of our predecessors in the executive master. And this was just a week or two, I think, into our classes. And one of the graduates at the time said to me, "Till, the program was really great. I enjoyed everything about it, but it was a lot of work." And so today, with the benefit of hindsight, and also if there are any prospective students in the audience, I can definitely confirm I enjoyed the studies, I enjoyed the program, every aspect of it, but it was an incredible amount of work. We're all, suffering the pains and asking for extensions and all the rest. But one of the biggest factors really making the participation in the executive master so meaningful for us were the discussions and the exchanges, I think, among classmates and, of course, the TAs and the professors. Because our group came from extremely diverse backgrounds. We represented the worlds of diplomacy, of humanitarian affairs, human rights, mediation, and even the military. And we had colleagues hailing from Afghanistan, Bahrain, Bangladesh, Canada, Cote d'Ivoire, Pakistan, Palestine, the US, and basically from all across Europe. So whichever topic we addressed in class and in the assignments and the papers, be it things like the extraterritorial use of force, questions of transitional justice, occupation, terrorism, very likely one of us had worked on it or experienced it firsthand, or sometimes both. And Patrick already gave us some credit here. Most importantly, everyone was very sincere and genuinely motivated. That was the best part. We did this after work, sort of overlapping a little bit with work in our free time, yet somehow, even on Friday nights like this, at 8:30 p.m., and sometimes after a glass of red wine, people manage to really stay focused and to be serious and to contribute to the discussions.
Yeah, we said we will first give an impression of what it was to follow the courses. And I also have to say that I'm really grateful to the people in the executive master, and the people who choose to have me as a, as a student, because I have to say that I struggled for years to be able to study law. Yeah, it might look crazy, like to struggle for years to study law, but it was really something that I wanted to do. I work for the ICRC, so I spend a lot of time also dealing with parties to conflict, and always struggling also to understand my colleagues, my legal colleagues. So like, why are they upset when I say this word and not this word? And it was like, okay, I wanted to be able to understand them. And each time I tried to follow a master, the answer, the reply was, you never studied law. Okay, never studied law, but I practiced law, and the outcome, the kind of job you can have after studying your master is exactly the job that I already have. So give me a chance. Never happened until I was accepted as a student in the executive master. So I think I'm not the only one without a pure law background, but a practice. And I think it was part of the enriching experience, and I think you didn't have a law background.
Yeah, no, I don't have a law background either, so here we are.
Both like, no, but thanks for the trust. I mean, I really want to thank the staff of the master for this trust, and also for giving us a lot. I received really a lot through the courses. The professors were amazing. I would never think I would learn and I would enjoy so much in listening to them. And I also never thought I had to give back everything through the thesis and the exams. It was really, as Till said, really, painful, but as well a learning experience. And I thought about this like sports. When you do sport, I think the more you push your limit, the more you suffer, and the more finally it hurts. And the more it's rewarding. So it was a bit like this with the master and the thesis.
So I think going forward, at least I hope so, all of us who complete the executive master will be better informed participants in any kind of discussion surrounding the legal parameters of armed conflict. And that can be just as a citizen or as a voter or as professionals in our field. And I think through the Executive Master Program, we've learned what these rules are, which institutions implement and enforce them. And we have seen that these rules sometimes cannot quite keep up with the reality, and that in addition, the development of the requisite institution lags behind even further. And today, I think we face armed conflicts involving the annexation of territory, the indiscriminate use of force, the use of chemical weapons, terrorism, the proliferation of autonomous weapon systems, and other advanced means and methods of warfare. And so the trend shows that conflict is increasing globally, and as a result, we see more instability, more people leaving their homes, becoming displaced internally and across borders. And we don't quite know what the future holds. And so on this somewhat somber note, I think, while these rules and the institutions that we've learned about in the Executive Master may not be perfect, I think for me the takeaway is that understanding them and being able to uphold and enforce the values they represent remains all the more important, and hopefully we as a group and also the LL.M students can contribute to this task.
Yeah. Now we were discussing about what each other could say, and I think we have to take stock as people who speak before us about the situation, the ongoing situation for many people, and through what we learn in the executive masters through our work, we try to contribute. It's never enough. We are not the decision makers, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. But yes, it was, I think, beside the fact that we can wonder where we are going, and to come back maybe to the master, it's also a great opportunity to work and to exchange with people from different backgrounds and from different countries with different opinion about the different situations. I also used to work a lot with armed groups, and we used to have jokes also with some of my colleagues about this. Jokes that you maybe cannot have in your work. If I would meet my colleagues in a professional environment, we will both be very official and not be able to speak as freely as we were able to speak, as room classmates. And that was really something big that we took away with us. Beside this, in terms of the quality of the course, as I said, now I'm able to understand my legal colleagues, and I'm also able to speak with much more confidence when I have to argue with some of the interlocutors, and that's very important because it gives credibility. And yes, I will let Till closing, and then I come back.
Exactly, yeah. So in closing, really, I think I speak on behalf of all of us in extending an extremely sincere thanks to all the professors. The lectures were phenomenal, but also to our our squad of teaching assistants, the members of the administration, Natalie, everybody who kept us afloat as we struggled to combine all the different things we had going on in our lives. And above all, I think this applies to me and probably to others in their patience in helping us get here today. And also helping those that are still finishing their theses. I think there's a handful. So we really look forward to keeping in touch with you, but also I think with all the friends that we've found in the program and to coming back here at some point.
And maybe a final word to be optimistic or to finish with a positive note. And I will paraphrase both my big boss, LL.M, who is the head of the Law and Policy Department in the ICRC, but as well Nelson Mandela, who said what matters about speaking about the ICRC, but I think we can think the same about international humanitarian law and international law in general, who said what matters is not about what it brings, but the things that it prevents. And yeah, we all wonder during this time, what does it really prevent? But I keep on thinking that, yes, it does prevent things. Thank you.
So thank you very much for these profound and moving words by both the representatives of the LL.M and the executive master. And now I have the pleasure and honor to present the keynote speaker, Professor Cécile Abdel. And normally you'd say in these circumstances everyone knows her, and therefore I don't have to introduce her, but again, they are the incidental victims in the room, and therefore I may explain that Professor Abdel is not only a professor, but a practitioner. She is a senior legal and policy advisor of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and an associate professor of international law at Tufts Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and she has done legal policy and humanitarian work for over 20 years, working for several UN institutions, in particular in the field of transitional justice, but also for the European Union, think tanks, and NGOs. And she joined the newly established UN international tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and for Rwanda, and worked there in important functions and drafted the first judgments on genocide. And an important thing, in my view, for these tribunals also to end their work, she drafted the completion strategies and directly contributed to the establishment of a state court of Bosnia-Herzegovina's war crime chamber and the special tribunal for Lebanon, where our unfortunately absent director was a judge. And so it's a great pleasure to have her as a keynote speaker, and by the way, the first keynote speaker in the history of the Academy who is female. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sassoli. I'm very honored. Thank you. Messieurs et mesdames les professeurs, honored guests, chers parents, dear students and graduates, good evening to you all. It is really an honor to be here tonight, and that's a particular honor because I know many of you in the room, so really congratulations and heartfelt congratulations to all of you here. I would like to start by really en rendant un hommage à Monsieur le directeur Roth qui nous manque ce soir et dont nous attendons le retour avec impatience. But I would also really like to start by congratulating properly all of you graduate students that we can now simply call graduates and not students anymore. You really have my most sincere and heartfelt congratulations. It is no small achievement to be graduating from the famous Geneva Academy. And I know all of the work that has gone into that, and in fact, we heard even more of what has gone into that. So really, congratulations. But I would also like to acknowledge those of you that are starting. There are a few current students here, and so you have to really acknowledge those that have preceded you, and I really hope that you will be following in their path. But it wouldn't be appropriate to really not really speak to the many families, spouses, partners, and close friends that are here supporting the graduates. Congratulations to you too, really. It takes support and dedication to nurture successful graduates. And in addition to that, your very presence here tonight is a testimony to the very special bond that you have. So their success is also yours, and congratulations to you. Donc aux familles, aux parents, aux partenaires, félicitations vraiment à vous aussi. Le succès des étudiants que vous soutenez est aussi le vôtre. Bravo. A ceremony such as the one that we have tonight is necessarily a turning point. You are preparing to assume new responsibilities, you're starting a new job or moving to a new career. It is both exciting and it is, yes, of course, also daunting. This is a time which is full of potential, but also of challenges to face, of choices to be made, and there are many unknown consequences. So as I was preparing to speak to you, I thought back into my own graduation just a few years ago, not that long ago. It was in the early 1990s, so yes, granted, it was a few years ago. And I just thought of the world then, back in the early 1990s, an armed conflict which was ravaging Europe. So as we fear today, the waves of migrants coming into Europe, at that stage, we were fearing a very armed conflict that was devastating Europe. The former Yugoslavia was dislocating, and its disintegration was really, in fact, having a terrible impact on people, causing the destruction of what had been a relatively peaceful, although diverse, society. Cities were being shelled. We had images of Sarajevo on the TV screens every evening. That was before Facebook. That was actually before the internet would be streaming news. People were watching TV, and on the TV, they would see those pictures of cities being bombed, of markets being shelled, of people waiting in queues for humanitarian assistance being targeted. So as we heard of this, we also heard of very sordid camps where rape was systematic, and we had pictures emerging of emaciated people, prisoners, behind barbed wires that were very reminiscent of the Nazi extermination camps, and that's in that context that the term ethnic cleansing was coined. So this obviously led to massive displacement, and first and foremost within the former Yugoslavia, but also beyond. And that really takes me back to what it is today and what the situation is today, because indeed I'm not describing this situation to tell me what I did. I mean, I choose to go working in humanitarian assistance, and then, as was mentioned, working with the newly established International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. But rather, I take you back in the early 1990s to really just simply demonstrate that the challenges that are posed to peace and security may be never-ending. They often repeat, yet they are not never exactly the same. So when we think and when you think of today's mayhem and the responsibility that you may have in trying to address those issues, just be aware that you have to learn from the past, but also find out your new solutions as a new generation. We could let ourselves be distraught by the very messy conflicts that we see, starting with the Middle and the Near East. But we should also simply consider that we cannot afford to stop giving and trying to do our part. As graduate of this academy, you really have a responsibility. You have the responsibility of the knowledge that has been transmitted to you that you now should keep using and moving forward. And so within that context, of course, being in Geneva here tonight, I cannot but refer to the word of Henri Dunant. And in fact, you probably know that quote from Henri Dunant. He said, "Seuls ceux qui sont assez fous pour penser qu'ils peuvent changer le monde y parviennent." In English, I will try to translate as something like, only those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world manage to do so. But Henri Dunant was, of course, not a fool, not crazy. He rather was moved by the suffering of other human beings, and that suffering moved him into action in Solferino first and foremost. Having done his part in Solferino, what he could have done, and what many others would have done, would simply to be very happy with his success and the fact that he had been managing to save lives. He could have returned to his relatively comfortable life in Geneva, but he did not stop there. Henri Dunant remained determined to help beyond the lives that he had saved. His empathy and his determination moved him to create an institution, the International Committee of the Red Cross, of course, which would outlast him and endure beyond his own life. Et je rends d'ailleurs ici hommage à la Fondation Dunant qui continue son travail. As you know, the ICRC celebrated not long ago its 150 years of amazing work, and today it is now 152 years old, nothing less, and we still need it today as much as we did in the 19th century. Hence, the tribute to someone who not only helped, but made sure that the work he did will be sustaining him and will go beyond him. Institutions bring sustainability to a cause, as the ICRC illustrates. And when we think of birthdays and institutions, I cannot but mention the United Nations, obviously. You know that the UN is much younger than the ICRC. It is only 70 years old, so it's basically a spring chicken when we compare it with the ICRC. Whether this spring chicken is in need of some reform and attention, yes, I will not deny that. But there is no doubt in my mind that the reforms that are badly needed are really should seek to reinforce the United Nations rather than weaken it. The three pillars of the UN Charter are still absolutely crucial, not only in international law, but also in the conduct of multilateral affairs. They are peace and security, development, and human rights. La paix et la sécurité, le développement et les droits de l'homme comme les trois piliers des Nations Unies. You will, of course, not be surprised to hear me stress the importance of human rights. After all, I'm here with my dual hat, and as you can see, I work for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights of the UN, and I'm glad to also see colleagues from there. Congratulations. Considering issues from a human rights perspective is, I believe, crucial to addressing not only the consequences of today's urgent problems, but also their root causes. And I would like to illustrate that by looking at two different issues. One is climate change, and the other one is the question of equality between half of the world and its other half. And as was aptly reminded by Professor Sassoli, I'm in fact the first woman speaking. So I will speak about women's rights, and not because only women should speak about women's rights. So first, climate change. Is this a human rights issue? Absolutely, yes. Climate change, first and foremost, directly but also indirectly threatens human rights. The full and effective enjoyment of human rights are threatened by climate change. And these include the right to life, the right to water and sanitation, the right to food, health, home and housing, self-determination, culture, development. They're all threatened by climate change. It also threatens prospects of sustainable development and the rights of future generations. But while the negative impact of climate change affects people everywhere in the world, we know that it disproportionately is borne by the persons and communities that are already vulnerable and that are in vulnerable situations, in armed conflict certainly, but also affected by poverty, sex, age, disability, and other indigenous and minority groups. It is the poorest individuals, communities, and countries that often bear the greatest burden of climate change, such as those in small islands, developing states. So clearly, a safe environment is a prerequisite for human rights and the enjoyment of human rights, but we also need to think that only through human rights and a human rights lens, we will really be able to address the very cause of climate change. And I think it's important that we therefore think of climate change as a demonstration of the fact that today's real challenges care in fact very little for the boundaries between humans and also for the borders that humans draw between them. These boundaries and borders are inconsequential for the biggest challenges that we face and that you need to address: migrations, armed conflict, also terrorism, poverty, and again, climate change, which can only be addressed by sustained global action. We simply cannot bomb poverty. We can't even bomb terrorism, really. All we do is maybe bomb terrorists and then add oil to the fire and create more of the same phenomenon that is terrorism. Military power alone will not be sufficient to fight the real challenges that we have. Those most pressing challenges may only be fought with the real weapons we have, which I will say include respect for the rule of law, for international law, democracy, the freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, etc. But I would like to underline a specific weapon which I believe has a great potential, and that is to ensure that the rights of women and girls everywhere in the world are protected and promoted, so that each girl and each woman reaches her full potential. Sustainable development, a truly peaceful and harmonious society, are only possible when all talents, including the talents of women, are able to flourish or thrive. Peace and security among humans are only possible when all rights, including women's rights, are truly recognized. The world will only be truly secured and safe when every woman, anywhere she is in the world, can safely leave her home. Also, when she can safely live in her own home, which is not granted. We cannot continue to fail and accept the fact that there are gender-based crimes and violence occurring even as women seek shelter in their own homes. We cannot continue to fail to highlight unequal access to key resources, including education, food, and housing, that we see in today's world. Women are still underemployed, underpaid, and otherwise undermined. We must do better. How? I think that a good place to start is education. Today, there is a large consensus about the importance of an available, accessible, acceptable, and quality education as the route to women's empowerment, as well as on the need to eliminate discrimination against women in the field of education. All girls, alongside boys, should be able to attend school. Currently, more than 35 million girls do not. 2/3 of these young women are from ethnic minorities. Many are excluded because of economic disadvantages, location, they live in rural areas, or personal status. But there are also other factors that lead to girls staying out of schools. Girls are far more likely than boys to perform hours and hours of unpaid work in their home to care for their younger siblings, including caregiving to siblings or older people. They're cooking and cleaning for free and for hours. They can go and fetch wood in very remote places. Their parents are also less likely to enroll them in schools if they have to make decisions and they can only afford one set of school fee that will usually go for their brother, not for the girls. Parents, teachers, and all of us often do not support girls' academic participation vigorously enough, and that makes them more likely to drop out. And even inside schools, girls may find that they are subjected to violence or harassment, as well as something much more pervasive, which is a pervasive sense that they do not belong there. An effective response to these challenges must build on a human rights approach, engaging all stakeholders in their educational process, including, of course, teachers, administrators, government, civil society, but also all of us. We need to ensure that educational institutions help eliminate harmful stereotypes regarding the traditional role of women and men, and also ensure that girls' right to make free choices regarding their field of study and careers are guaranteed. So to all of you here, and especially the young women among you, you really have been given a treasure, the treasure of education. And please cherish this treasure and use it well. And that does not only apply to the young women, but certainly to the young and less young men among you. Cherish the treasure that you have been given and use it well. Remember Henri Dunant, seuls ceux qui sont assez fous pour penser qu'ils peuvent changer le monde y parviennent. And of course, I could not simply cite a man, so I went and looked for a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, who is certainly, in fact, one of the grandmothers of international law, of human rights, and she was a founding mother of the UN, and she helped not only elaborate the UN Charter, but also the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as you know well. So she said something very similar. She said, you must do the things you think you cannot do. So each of you, farewell, and please remember those words. Do the things you think you cannot do. You've already done them partially by graduating. You can continue further. But also remember the integrity of purpose and the fact that your sense of humanity is what will hopefully make a difference in this very troubled but also beautiful world. Goodbye. And congratulations again.
Merci infiniment pour this keynote speech, which was very profound, and it brings us back to the incidental victims. The parents present here, they should get a medal because most of our students are women, and therefore our parents apparently understood it, and we have even to start an affirmative action to have some men, because it's also important that some men deal with humanitarian matters and not only with war and business. And now I have the pleasure to introduce a man who heads La Société Henri Dunant, Monsieur Roger Durand, who is a historian, and he will present us first the Henri Dunant Society, and then there will be the famous and so much appreciated Henri Dunant Prize to our best and most humanitarian LL.M. thesis. Monsieur Durand. Vous présentez.
Oui, tout à fait. Chers amis, cher professeur Sassoli, un grand merci de nous donner la parole. Alors, précisons tout de suite, on a d'un côté la Société Henri Dunant, qui est une société à but historique. Nous essayons d'approfondir notre connaissance sur la vie et l'œuvre d'Henri Dunant, qui, bien qu'il soit connu, en tout cas son nom, dans le monde entier, présente encore de très nombreuses zones d'ombre dans sa vie. Entre 14 et 20 ans, on ne sait pas ce qu'il fait. Entre 1875 et 1890, on perd quasiment sa trace. Donc on a encore là des grands espoirs de trouvailles historiques. Mais nous en savons déjà assez pour pouvoir affirmer que par sa vie, par son engagement, il a d'un côté fondé une institution formidable, la Croix-Rouge internationale, donc non seulement le Comité international de la Croix-Rouge, mais aussi le dispositif des sociétés nationales de la Croix-Rouge. Il a été aidé par Gustave Moignet, le général Dufour, et un tas de médecins et de juristes européens dont on oublie trop souvent le nom. D'un autre côté, Henri Dunant a été un véritable philanthrope, dans la mesure où, pendant toute sa vie, il était soucieux de détecter des victimes et de proposer des solutions. Et on peut véritablement dire, je crois sans forfanterie, que la démarche humanitaire démarre en 1862, quand il publie Un souvenir de Solferino, et elle est véritablement institutionnalisée le 22 août 1864, lorsque la première convention de Genève est signée. On peut dire que l'humanité est entrée à ce moment-là dans une nouvelle ère, l'ère humanitaire. Malheureusement, on parle beaucoup plus des ères comme l'ère atomique et d'autres sinistres moments décisifs, mais là, on est véritablement dans une nouvelle époque. Et vous, professeurs, vous, étudiants, vous êtes maintenant les porte-paroles de cette démarche. Vous êtes, on pourrait dire, le bras académique dans un monde dont on a rappelé, et c'est malheureusement trop facile, tous les terrains d'action pour la démarche humanitaire. Alors, nous avons fondé, effectivement, il y a une trentaine d'années, la Fondation Prix Henri Dunant, et ceci grâce à une branche de la famille Dunant, représentée par les Mourgues d'Algues, notamment Pierre-André ici, et sa mère, Madame Pierrette Mourgues d'Algues, qui descendait d'un frère d'Henri Dunant, avait lancé avec notre société cette Fondation Prix Henri Dunant. Alors, cette fondation est là pour but d'encourager des femmes et des hommes, parfois des institutions, qui contribuent à développer, à prolonger, à adapter les idées humanitaires d'Henri Dunant. Parce que vous le savez, la réalité de 1850-1860 n'a quasiment plus de points communs avec la réalité d'aujourd'hui. Et le droit international humanitaire doit perpétuellement s'adapter, même si possible anticiper les situations où il va intervenir. Donc, nous savons que Dunant, à la fois, a lancé une problématique, une nouvelle démarche humanitaire, mais nous savons moins bien qu'il avait entamé des causes très variées pour lesquelles il n'a pas réussi, mais où il avait essayé d'obtenir des améliorations. C'est la suppression de l'esclavage, qui encore aujourd'hui, sous de nombreuses formes, existe. C'est l'arbitrage international, qui balbutie encore aujourd'hui, même si on se félicite de l'arbitrage international. Chaque fois qu'une grande puissance est en cause, il n'y a plus d'arbitrage international. C'est l'arbitrage international, et il est laissé pour les petits pays, pour les faibles. Alors que Dunant voulait que ce soit les grands qui se retrouvent autour d'une table. Par exemple, l'arbitrage de l'Alabama en 1872 entre la Grande-Bretagne et les États-Unis. Mais c'est un cas, je crois, unique dans toute l'histoire de l'arbitrage. C'est la lutte contre le militarisme, contre l'impérialisme. Naturellement, ce sont des mots, ce sont des termes, mais lui s'était vigoureusement engagé. Et c'est intéressant parce que toutes les sociétés nationales de la Croix-Rouge et les quelques-unes du Croissant-Rouge, à l'époque, étaient gérées, dirigées par des militaires. Dans chacun des comités nationaux, on avait des amiraux, des généraux, des maréchaux, des colonels, etc. La Croix-Rouge était un élément du dispositif des armées. En Suisse, la Croix-Rouge, au moment d'une mobilisation générale, par exemple en août 1914, le président de la Croix-Rouge remet sa démission au Conseil fédéral et c'est le médecin-chef de l'armée qui devient le chef de la Croix-Rouge suisse. Et il faudra attendre l'après-guerre, notamment avec la Ligue des sociétés de la Croix-Rouge, pour que la Croix-Rouge s'affranchisse de son exclusivité en faveur des militaires pour s'occuper des populations civiles. Or, Henri Dunant, dès le début, avait plaidé pour qu'on s'occupe aussi des civils. Il a plaidé le désarmement, il a plaidé la suppression du colonialisme. Fin 19e, c'était courageux. Et il s'était aussi lancé dans la création d'une croix verte qui devait être pour les femmes la même protection que la Croix-Rouge pour les militaires blessés. Donc oui, un foisonnement d'idées. Et nous, avec ce prix Henri Dunant, nous aimerions encourager des intellectuels à aller plus loin, à aller ailleurs dans la problématique humanitaire. Alors, nous avons mis en place 2 prix. Il y a ce qu'on appelle le prix terrain, qui est dédié à des hommes et à des femmes qui s'engagent dans des situations concrètes, notamment pour faire mieux connaître le droit international humanitaire. En mai dernier, nous avons eu le plaisir de donner ce prix à Madame Yolvi Lena Padilla, qui s'est fait une sorte de vocation d'expliquer aux populations autochtones de Colombie leurs droits. Vous savez que la Colombie, depuis 50 ans, a une guerre civile. Or, une des principales victimes, ce sont ces populations autochtones. Et Yolvi Padilla, avec un courage qui est parfois frise l'inconscience, va expliquer à ces gens, avec des concepts nouveaux, avec des mots nouveaux, leurs droits, et ainsi renforcer leur capacité de résistance. Nous avons, en 2011, donné le prix à Pierre Claverme Bonimpa, dont j'espère que certains d'entre vous ont entendu parler. C'est un défenseur des droits de l'homme au Burundi, c'est un défenseur des droits des détenus au Burundi, et il était victime, au printemps dernier, d'un attentat avec arme à feu. Il était blessé au visage, gravement. Heureusement, on a pu l'exfiltrer, il était soigné en Belgique. C'est aussi un de nos prix Henri Dunant Terrain. Alors nous avons aussi, et c'est ce qui vous concerne, le prix Henri Dunant Recherche. Et alors là, je tiens à remercier les professeurs de l'Académie, parce que ça fait maintenant 10 ans, même 11 ans que nous travaillons ensemble, et c'est un plaisir et un enrichissement chaque fois. Alors, c'est donc un partenariat qui nous attribuerons donc un prix recherche dans le cadre du programme d'enseignement de l'Académie. Notre but, eh bien, il est de récompenser un travail académique exceptionnel qui contribue, vous le devinez, à l'approfondissement, au rayonnement, au renouvellement des idéaux d'Henri Dunant par le droit. Alors, pour 2015, nous allons le remettre dans quelques minutes. Le jury était composé pour l'Académie du professeur Robert Roth, qui était remplacé, je peux dire, par Nathalie Staffler, qui est notre ange gardien dans la maison, Nicolas Florquin, le professeur Cathy Clément, et Étienne Custer du CICR. Alors, nous décernons ce prix au mémoire rédigé par Madame, je vais peut-être écorcher la prononciation, je vous prie de m'excuser, Vachali Sharma. Alors, bravo, restez ici. J'ai encore 2 mots à dire, restez ici, c'est parfait. On est bien entourés. Venez entre nous deux, plutôt. Oui, oui. Merci. Donc, le jury a été impressionné par la qualité de l'écriture, la structure des arguments, la maîtrise de nombreuses références juridiques, le sens de communication de l'auteur. De même, sa capacité à mettre en relation différentes branches du droit international humanitaire pour soutenir son argumentation. Le jury a également apprécié le potentiel d'application pratique de la thèse, qui donne des pistes et des exemples concrets sur l'opportunité d'une meilleure transparence dans l'utilisation des drones à des fins militaires, ceci afin d'améliorer le respect du droit international humanitaire. La question de l'utilisation des drones, vous le savez, est également un problème humanitaire clé actuellement. Et malheureusement, cette question ne risque que d'augmenter d'importance et d'actualité. L'argumentation développée par Madame Sharma dans sa thèse au sujet du rôle fondamental du principe de transparence pour améliorer le respect du DHI est également tout à fait pertinente pour d'autres problématiques humanitaires, par exemple le récent bombardement de l'hôpital MSF de Kunduz. S'attaquer à l'utilisation abusive des drones par les grandes puissances, s'attaquer aux risques engendrés par les populations civiles, s'inscrit donc pleinement dans l'esprit et la problématique d'Henri Dunant. C'est pour ça que nous sommes enchantés de notre prix Recherche 2015. Bravo à Madame Sharma.
Je vous laisse la parole maintenant.
A very good evening to everyone who is here tonight. I'm extremely delighted and inspired that my paper was considered worthy for this event, for this award. It is indeed a great honor to reflect and take forward the values and vision of a truly iconic figure. And I would like to give a special thanks to Professor Sassoli for his valuable guidance and encouragement throughout. My paper is on transparency and drone operations, and I explore the transparency requirements in IHL. Drone operations are problematic on a number of grounds. They have been criticized. Lack of transparency regarding legal basis for the strikes, the identity of the targets, disclosure about information about civilian casualties and investigation remain one of the prominent issues plaguing these operations. I highlight this issue because without transparency, it is impossible to even have access to information, which needs to be the first step to evaluate and to establish whether states are following their legal obligations. Thus, transparency is a prerequisite for all other steps to follow. In my paper, I discuss transparency as an umbrella term which encapsulates within itself notions of accountability, investigation, reporting, monitoring, access to information, and oversight. Thus, transparency is both an end and a means. And I believe that in today's world and the crisis we face regarding drone operations and their regulation by international law, transparency is a very legally relevant principle which also reflects social needs and realities. Myriad calls for transparencies have been made by all international actors, and they can be found in UN resolutions, reports, NGO initiatives, scholarly writings, etc. And they all base these calls on the international humanitarian and human rights obligations of the states. Now, while transparency enjoys a strong foothold in human rights, it is not that obvious an obligation under IHL. IHL is especially designed to take into account the realities of armed conflict, and armed conflict in itself is perceived to favor secrecy. However, I establish in my paper that there is a positive legal basis for transparency under IHL, and this argument is supported by the duty to investigate, which is well established, and also embodied in the Article 1 comment to the Geneva Conventions, which obliges high contracting parties to respect and to ensure respect of the conventions. I further discuss right to effective remedy and right to truth as the basis for pushing for more transparency. These are developing rights in IHL, but they still form a convincing argument to interpret IHL as favoring transparency. Finally, transparency is also intrinsically linked with maintaining international legal order and rule of law. And taking this further, in the end, I discuss certain compelling policy arguments which favor the move towards more transparency. For not only justice must be done, it must also seem to be done. While I reached these conclusions, I also looked at transparency requirements in human rights. And I looked at that because human rights is a more developed notion in human rights, and also human rights and IHL go together, they're very well connected, and they also protect certain similar interests. And most compelling fact is that it is established now that IHL and human rights apply in parallel in situations of armed conflict, and it is desirable to harmonize the rules of conduct of the two. However, it is not a blind exercise of importation. I give utmost regard to the fact, taking into account specificities of armed conflict and the ideology of IHL whenever I pushed for transparency obligations. The findings of my paper, even though they are made in context of drone operations, are fundamental in nature, and they can independently be extended to other contemporary and pertinent issues covered by IHL. I believe that establishing transparency obligations in IHL will go a long way in proving the relevance of IHL to deal with the contemporary challenges like ensuring compliance by states and generating respect for the law. I thank you for your attention. And the show must go on, so I give the floor to other people.
Sincere congratulations. And now I have the honor to announce the prize for the best LL.M paper offered by the Academy to the technically best paper, which is for Mr. Ilya Ivanov. Where is he? It's hidden here. So, he wrote on obligations of unorganized belligerents under customary international law. Oh, he did. That's not. He will come. Here he is. So, it's a real pleasure.
Thank you.
To give you this. And the award. Congratulations. And now, finally, but it's always a pity because we could have many other ceremonies before you finally get your diplomas. We could also make a little exam, but we will not do that. For a last check before you start to do it yourselves, and you are no longer students in a few minutes. So we start to and I am very honored, and I feel slightly partial because, and I apologize with the executive master students whom I do not yet know personally, but I'm sure that in your career, if I still make a career, I will meet you quite often. So, I think you will read it.
Ladies and gentlemen, now comes the moment that our students and participants have all been waiting for. I will call the names of the students, so please come to the stage when I call your name and you will receive your diploma. The first student of the LL.M is Isiak Ahmed. Cédric Apercé de France, cum laude. Solène Bégaud de France, cum laude. Biruk Tawit Bekele d'Éthiopie. Noah Ben Saïd de Tunisie. Marliet Brandes, Germany, cum laude. Ahmad El Sleman, Liban. Juliette Ferron de France, cum laude. Chiara Gabriele, Italie, summa cum laude. Eline Gouvaerts, Belgique, cum laude. Theresa Adzeler, Autriche. Sandra Horst, Germany, cum laude. Ilya Ivanov, Russie, cum laude. Carmen Kankundire, Burundi, cum laude. Chisanga Mwila, Zambie. Rhiannon Painter, Royaume-Uni, summa cum laude. Evancia Revel, France, cum laude. Michael Reipel, Germany, cum laude. Vishali Sharma, India, summa cum laude. Marko Švekavica, Croatie. Anna Stoat, Royaume-Uni, cum laude. Bruno Stoss Lirio, Brésil, cum laude. Safi Vantlen, Pays-Bas, cum laude. Mayank Verma, India, cum laude. Giulia Zomignani Barbosa, Brésil. I will now list the names of those who were not able to be present tonight. We have Adriana Caicedo Trujillo, Colombia, cum laude. Rasmane Congo du Burkina Faso. Manar El Sayed d'Égypte, cum laude. Eva Maria Jelinek de Suède, cum laude. Léa Kuzanik de Croatie. Sara Larocca, Italie, cum laude. Erin Maher d'Australie, summa cum laude. Lourdes Marie Madi du Canada, cum laude. Et pour finir, Stéphanie Toy de Belgique, cum laude. I will now continue with the participants of the Executive Masters. So the first graduate is Anne-Marie Dongui de Côte d'Ivoire. Mohammad Amir Khan du Pakistan. Audrey Palama de France. Till Papenfuss, Germany. Mohammad Jawad Raha, Afghanistan. Karim Silué, Côte d'Ivoire. Nada Tarbouche, Suisse. I will now list the names of those who are not present tonight. We have Giulio Coppi, d'Italie. Jeff Moran, des États-Unis. Céline Perren, de France. Florimond Poirier, du Canada et de la France. Matthew Sands, UK. And Rula Shadid, Palestine. Congratulations to you all, and we wish you all the best.
So thank you so much. I would also like to thank His Excellency, the Ambassador of Afghanistan, that he made the honor to us to come, and I think this is a good starting tradition that ambassadors should attend graduating ceremonies of. Thank you so much, and congratulations to everyone. I would suggest that the graduates move to the l'escalier, c'est quoi en anglais? Je sais pas. Pardon? The staircase. And don't forget to wear badges. Obviously, the graduates know that combatants have to distinguish themselves from the civilian population. But for this time, even the incidental civilian victims have to wear badges, otherwise you don't get food. I'm not sure whether this is in conformity with humanitarian law, but humanitarian law doesn't apply in Switzerland because there's no armed conflict. So we will then move to have a cocktail and a dinner. Thank you so much to everyone, and don't forget the photograph on the stairs.